Let go. Let go.
No!
It is over.
It won't be long now. Your death is near. Only I can sustain you. Let go. Serve me.
You are nothing.
Nothing. I am a god! Before you walked this land, I ruled.
Magnificent.
Serve me, and we will rebuild my empire.
No.
No! You there! You will die!
Not a slave.
Been in a freaking airplane with the door open, and you go, and the guy walks you up to the end of the thing, and you're standing and your toes are on the edge, and you're looking out down to death. And they say, on 3. And they say, 1, 2, and he pushes you on 2 because people grab on 3. And you go, and you fall out of the airplane, and in 1 second, you realize that it's the most blissful experience of your life. You're flying, right? It doesn't feel like falling, right? It's like you actually are kind of held a little bit by the wind, and then you start falling, and there's zero fear. You realize that the point of maximum danger is the point of minimum fear. It's bliss. It's bliss, and you're flying, right? And you're doing that, and then 20 seconds, 25 seconds, 40 seconds, and you have enough time to just kind of be like, oh, shit, that's that building. That's not like that one. Oh, you can see the ocean. And the lesson for me was, why were you scared in your bed the night before? What do you need that fear for? Why are you scared in your bed 16 hours before you jump? Why are you scared in the car? Why could you not enjoy breakfast? What did you need that? The fear is fear of what? You're nowhere even near the airplane. Everything up to the stepping out, there's actually no reason to be scared. It only just ruins your day. You don't have to jump. And then in that moment, all of a sudden, where you should be terrified is the most blissful experience of your life. And God placed the best things in life on the other side of terror. On the other side of your maximum fear are all of the best things in life.
Now, philosophy-wise, the thing that we're trying to defend here and trying to hold out for, frankly, is just meaningful choice. It's that core RPG sense of identity. And we've heard feedback from players, and I think that which make good points over the years, who ask the question of, like, is WoW even an RPG anymore? What about my character customization? What about my identity? What about my agency? Like, every game you've ever played, probably in the genre, going back 20 years or more, has you make these choices about what do you want your character to excel at, and what are your weaknesses? What are the trade-offs? Are you going to play some single-player RPG and focus on all your stealth traits, and whether it's Skyrim, Fallout, whatever, or are you going to be the toe-to-toe brawler, or are you going to solve problems in different ways using ingenuity, and you're going to have strengths and weaknesses? The second that we say that only cosmetics can fall in that space, that anything that has a mechanical advantage to it needs to be something that can be changed instantly on the fly, we're saying that identity can no longer include those core RPG elements. And I understand that community has a real big part in this, and that people's fear is often driven by their firsthand experience, getting declined from pugs, getting turned down or benched by their raid leader or whatever else because of these choices or things that feel like they're out of their control. And the path forward for us right now is to try to navigate those rocks on either side and find a way to save what we see as like the beating heart of the RPG genre without giving players those terrible experiences.
Yeah, that's just how. But again, getting back to strengths and weaknesses, I guess a question for you and for kind of as a representative of a large portion of the high-end competitive community, I think a trend and something that we have seen on the development team on a regular basis in terms of feedback is the desire to eliminate sources of variance, to eliminate any form of the dreaded RNG, anything that removes control from a player. Do you feel like it's an ideal endpoint for every hunter who is doing a Mythic Raid encounter across the world, really, to basically be the same in terms of their stats, their abilities, and the only difference among them is who can push their buttons more effectively, who can execute the mechanical aspects of their class?
Had extremely hyper specialization, and that was bad for most players who want to do their own thing and be accepted in the raid regardless. But the trade-off to not having hyper specialization is homogeneity, or at least the feeling of homogeneity. So on the aesthetics part of your experience, you feel like everything's the same because you're just as good as another DPS. If you're a DPS, it's like, it doesn't matter that I'm Destro instead of Demonology or Affliction, I'm the same. Like, I don't bring anything to the raid that people even care about. It's inconsequential. And so my personal preferences come down to how I want my character to look when I'm doing it. Do I want to be followed by a horde of demons, or do I want to be dotting things up? At the end of the day, there's no difference. The windows, like the playstyle is very much the same. There are a few specializations in the game right now that still have very unique playstyles. I'm looking at you, Shadow Priests. I'm looking at you, survival hunters. So some specializations still have some degree of uniqueness to the way they play, but most of them overlap on a very basic level. And I think that's something that killed off a part of the soul of what made the fantasy believable, which is that rogues were not priests, or rogues were not feral druids, that were not another like warriors, or like mobility was restrained to certain classes. The ability to escape from combat was for certain classes. The ability to stop you from moving was for certain classes. Entangling Roots, Frost Nova. You couldn't do that with everyone. Not everybody had access to similar tools. So you get the point, right? And if I look at Vanilla WoW, one of the problems that I guess you could definitely point to as aggravating the fact of hyper specializations is that the specializations and the rotations and the skills you could use in a raid were just not very compelling. It's like, yeah, okay, I'm a destruction warlock, so I spam Shadow Bolt, and that's bad, and it's not fun. I'm not enjoying myself here. It's like, well, here's the big question: is, are you in the raid because you want to have fun DPSing, let's put it that way, or do you want to do it because of the experience of raiding? And that's an entirely different approach to the aesthetic of the fantasy aesthetic, right? It's very different, because some people just got into a raid because that's 40 dudes beating on a big demon. The fantasy is pretty strong. It's like a bunch of ragtag idiots that somehow managed to coordinate miraculously, and they get to fight the boss. And that's a fantasy that's pretty strong. And then you've got the personal play aspect of it, which is why I use these spells to maximize my DPS. Now, as I said earlier, the more you min-max, the more the fantasy is lost on you.
Summoner. It uses a book. This is the pet DPS caster. It summons little versions of some of the primals. Its rotation revolves around keeping its dots up and using Aetherflow abilities to use special high damage attacks in order to unlock another phase where it uses Dreadworm Ether to channel Bahamut into its body and use death flare attacks. After it does this twice, it's able to channel Bahamut further and actually summon him and control him to use even stronger attacks. So the rotation spans over a 2-minute period. Most people would say it's a complex job to learn at first, but once you do, it's more simple to understand. Its DPS is very high, usually a little bit below Black Mage, and it's very mobile.
It's that hard. I think what happens though sometimes is that we let our intellectual selves overrule those passions. And so that's what needs to be guarded against. My job, one of my jobs as the leader of Amazon, is to encourage people to be bold. And people love to focus on things that aren't yet working. And that's good, it's human nature. That kind of divine discontent can be very helpful. But you really, it's incredibly hard to get people to take bold bets. And you need to encourage that. And if you're going to take bold bets, they're going to be experiments. And if they're experiments, you don't know ahead of time whether they're going to work. Experiments are by their very nature prone to failure. But big successes, a few big successes, compensate for dozens and dozens of things that didn't work. So, bold bets, AWS, Kindle, Amazon Prime, our third-party seller business, all of those things are examples of bold bets that did work, and they pay for a lot of experiments. I've made billions of dollars of failures at Amazon.com, literally billions of dollars of failures. And you might remember Pets.com or Cosmo, or give myself a root canal with no anesthesia very easily. None of those things are fun, but they also, they don't matter. What really matters is companies that don't continue to experiment, companies that don't embrace failure, they eventually get in a desperate position where the only thing they can do is make a kind of Hail Mary bet at the very end of their corporate existence. Whereas companies that are, making bets all along, even, big bets, but not bet the company bets. I don't believe in bet the company bets. That's when you're desperate. That's the last thing you can do.
One of the most difficult choices I have ever faced in life was in 2008. I think I had maybe $30 million left, or $30 or $40 million left in 2008. I had two choices. I could put it all into one company, and then the other company would definitely die, or split it between the two companies. But if I split it between the two companies, then both might die. When you put your blood, sweat, and tears into creating something, or building something, it's like a child. And so it's like, which one am I going to let one starve to death? I couldn't bring myself to do it, so I split the money between the two. Fortunately, thank goodness, they both came through.
What was your biggest failure, and how did it change you?
Well, there's a ton of failures along the way, that's for sure.
No! This was not the deal I made!